My sister claimed her husband was abusing her and demanded I transfer my apartment to her name as a safe house. I asked questions. She called me a betrayer. Part 1. The Call. The call came on a Tuesday night, just after 11. I was already in bed, half asleep, when my phone lit up with my sister's name. She never called this late. We weren't the type of siblings who talked on the phone regularly anyway. A text here, a family dinner there, polite distance that felt comfortable enough. So when I saw her name glowing in the dark, I knew something was wrong. I left him. Her voice was ragged, barely recognizable. I finally left him. He's been abusing me for years, and I finally had the courage to leave. I need help. I need somewhere to go. Please. My heart dropped into my stomach. I sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake, my mind racing through everything I knew about her marriage. She'd been with her husband for 6 years, married for 4. I'd never liked him much. Something about his confidence felt practiced, his charm a little too polished. But I'd never suspected abuse. My sister had always seemed fine. Happy, even. She posted photos of their vacations, talked about their weekend plans, never seemed afraid or diminished around him. But abuse victims hide it. I knew that. Everyone knows that. The ones who seem happiest in public are sometimes the ones suffering most in private. So I didn't question. I just listened to her sob and told her I'd do whatever I could to help. Where are you right now? I asked. A gas station. I just drove. I couldn't stay there another night. Okay. Let me think. I grabbed my laptop and started searching for hotels nearby. I'm booking you a room. Can you drive another 20 minutes? Yes. Yes, I can do that. I found a decent hotel, paid for 3 nights with my credit card, and texted her the confirmation number. She thanked me through tears and said she'd call me in the morning. When I hung up, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to process what had just happened. My sister was fleeing an abusive husband. My sister, who I'd known my whole life, had been hiding something terrible. I felt sick with guilt for not seeing it, for not asking more questions at family dinners, for accepting her surface-level everything's fine answers without pushing deeper. I didn't sleep much that night. Part 2. The first 2 weeks. The next morning, my sister called again. She sounded calmer but exhausted. She told me she couldn't go back to their house, though her husband had owned it before the marriage. She had nothing except what she'd grabbed in her car. Clothes. Her laptop. Some jewelry. She'd left behind most of her possessions because she'd been afraid to take too long, afraid he'd come home and stop her. I offered what I could. I transferred money to her account for expenses, food, toiletries, whatever she needed. I helped her research apartments, though she said she couldn't sign a lease yet because she didn't know where she'd be working or if she'd need to move to another city entirely. She was scared he'd find her. Scared he'd track her down through her job, through family, through any connection that might lead back to her. After a week in the hotel, she moved to a women's shelter. She said she was working with an advocate there, someone who specialized in domestic violence cases, who was helping her build a safety plan. I was relieved. Professional help. Structure. A path forward. I visited her at the shelter a few times, bringing groceries, sitting with her in their common room while she talked. The stories she told were horrifying. She said he'd controlled everything, their finances, her schedule, who she could see and when. She said he'd isolated her from friends, made her feel like she couldn't function without him. She said there had been physical violence too. Not constant, not always visible, but present. A shove during an argument that left bruises. A grab that twisted her wrist. Once, she said, he'd thrown something across the room that shattered near her head, close enough that she felt the fragments hit her face. I believed her completely. Why wouldn't I? She was my sister. She was crying. She was in a shelter. The details were specific and painful. I felt like a fool for never seeing the signs, and I promised myself I'd do whatever it took to help her get free. Part 3. The Escalation. After 2 weeks in the shelter, my sister's requests escalated. It started with housing. The shelter was temporary. They couldn't keep anyone longer than a certain period. She needed to find permanent housing, but she couldn't afford rent without her husband's income. She'd been a freelance graphic designer during the marriage, working occasionally but mostly supported by his salary. She had some savings but not enough for a deposit plus first month's rent in our city's market. "I've been thinking," she said during one of my visits. She was sitting across from me in the shelter's common room, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee. "Your apartment is perfect." "My apartment? He doesn't know where you live. He's never been there. We always did family stuff at Mom's house or restaurants. If I lived there, I'd be completely hidden. She paused. And if you transferred it to my name, there'd be no connection at all. He could find your address. People can look up property records, you know, but it wouldn't lead to me. I blinked. You want me to transfer my apartment to you? Not just to stay there. To own it. For my safety. She leaned forward, her voice urgent. Think about it. If you own the apartment and I live there, he could potentially find your address through public records. He could come to the apartment, pressure you, find out where I am. But if I own it under my own name, which I'm going to change anyway, there's no connection to trace. You'd transfer ownership, I'd change my name, and I'd be completely untraceable. It's the only way I'll truly be safe. I sat back, trying to absorb what she was asking. She wanted my apartment. Not to borrow, to own. Permanently. My apartment wasn't huge, but it was mine. I'd bought it 3 years ago with savings I'd accumulated over nearly a decade of working. It was the only significant asset I had. And she was asking me to just give it to her. I want to help, I said carefully. But that's a really big ask. Let me think about it. Her face tightened. What's there to think about? My safety should be more important than property. It is. I need to process this. She nodded, but I could see she was disappointed. Hurt, even. I left the shelter that day feeling confused and vaguely guilty, like I'd failed some kind of test. Part 4. The questions begin. Over the next few days, I tried to think through her request logically. I wanted to help. I genuinely wanted her safe. But something about the demand felt off. The escalation from, I need a place to stay, to, I need to own your property, had happened in just 2 weeks. Her reasoning, that ownership transfer was the only way to hide, didn't quite hold up under scrutiny. If she was hiding from an abuser, wouldn't changing her own name and address be sufficient? Why did she specifically need to own my apartment? I started asking questions. Gently, because I didn't want her to think I was doubting her story. Have you filed a police report? I asked during a phone call. No. The police don't take these things seriously. They just tell him to stay away and then nothing would happen. What about a restraining order? Those don't actually protect anyone. They're just paper. He could violate it and I'd be dead before the police even showed up. What does your advocate at the shelter say about housing options? She got vague. They're helping, but it's slow. Government assistance, waiting lists, all that bureaucratic stuff. They can't guarantee my safety. Only I can do that. That's why I need your apartment. I noticed something in that conversation. Every official channel, police, restraining orders, shelter resources, was dismissed as inadequate. The only acceptable solution was my apartment. When only one answer is acceptable, the question isn't really being asked. It's an extraction dressed as a plea. I didn't voice that thought, but it settled in my mind like a small stone. Part 5. The inconsistencies. The more I talked to my sister, the more I noticed small inconsistencies in her stories. The timeline of events shifted slightly each telling. She'd said the abuse had been happening for years, but in another conversation mentioned it started about a year ago when his job got more stressful. She described an incident where he hit her in the kitchen, then later told the same story but said it happened in the bedroom. I didn't want to dismiss these discrepancies. I knew that trauma affects memory, that abuse victims often struggle to recall details precisely because the events are so painful. But I noticed them. I filed them away in the back of my mind. She also seemed to avoid answering direct questions about documentation. Had she ever taken photos of bruises? No, she'd been too scared. Had she ever texted a friend about what was happening? No, she was too isolated. Had she ever seen a doctor for injuries? No, he wouldn't let her go. Every piece of potential evidence had a reason it didn't exist. Maybe that was true. Maybe abusers are that thorough in their control. But maybe it meant something else. Update 1. The husband's side. I did something I wasn't sure I should do. I reached out to her husband. I know how that sounds. Dangerous. Stupid. Siding with the abuser. But I needed to hear his side of the story, if only to confirm what my sister had told me. I didn't reveal her location. I would never do that. I just asked if he'd meet me for coffee. Neutral territory. A public place. He agreed immediately, which surprised me. I expected defensiveness, hostility. Instead, he sounded tired and confused. When we met, he looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. His eyes were red-rimmed, his clothes rumpled. He didn't seem angry. He seemed devastated. I don't know what she told you, he said, stirring his coffee without drinking it. But I never touched her. I never controlled her. I gave her access to all our accounts. She wasn't isolated. She saw her family and friends constantly. I don't know why she's doing this. He pulled out his phone and started showing me things. Text messages between them, not all pleasant, but nothing that looked like abuse. Some arguments, some frustrations, but also affection, plans, inside jokes. He showed me financial records proving she had full access to their joint accounts, had her own credit cards, made purchases whenever she wanted. He showed me photos from her social media, posted throughout the marriage, showing happy moments, vacations, dinners, a birthday party where she was laughing with friends. I'm not saying our marriage was perfect, he said. We had problems. She wanted things I couldn't give her sometimes. But abuse. I never hurt her. I never threatened her. I don't even know where she is right now, and honestly, I'm scared for her. She's done this before, you know. I stiffened. Done what before? Left. Accused. With her ex-boyfriend, before me. She told me about it when we first started dating, said he'd been stalking her, that she'd had to cut off contact with everyone who knew him. But I met some of his friends later, and they said she'd cheated on him and made up the stalking thing to avoid confrontation. I didn't believe them at the time. I thought they were biased. He looked down at his coffee. Now I don't know what to believe. I left that meeting feeling like the ground had shifted beneath me. His evidence didn't prove he was innocent. Abusers can be manipulative, can present a perfect facade. But his story complicated the simple narrative my sister had given me. Either he was a criminal mastermind who'd fooled everyone, his friends, his family, the people who knew them as a couple, or she was telling stories. Occam's razor cut a certain direction. Update 2. The pattern. I talked to our mother next. Carefully, without revealing everything, I asked about my sister's past relationships. Mom was reluctant at first. We don't air family laundry, she said, which was such a mom thing to say that I almost laughed despite myself. I need to know, I said. For context. She sighed. Then she told me things I'd never heard before. The ex-boyfriend who was stalking her? He hadn't been stalking her. She'd cheated on him, and when he confronted her about it, she'd panicked and told everyone he was following her, watching her, making her feel unsafe. She'd moved suddenly, changed her phone number, told the family she was fleeing a dangerous man. Then, a year later, Mom had run into him at a grocery store. He'd been confused, hurt, asked if my sister was okay. He said he'd tried to reach out to apologize for any part he'd played in their fights, but she'd blocked him everywhere. He'd never stalked her. He'd never threatened her. He'd just wanted closure. Then there was the boss. My sister had worked at a marketing firm for 2 years, then quit suddenly, claiming her supervisor had been harassing her. She said she'd reported it to HR, but they hadn't done anything. She said she'd had to leave for her own safety. But Mom had heard through a family friend who worked there that the company had actually investigated thoroughly and found nothing. Several co-workers had said my sister was the difficult one, missed deadlines, blamed others, had conflicts with multiple colleagues. The harassment claim came right when she was about to be put on a performance improvement plan. I've never mentioned these things because I wanted to protect her, Mom said quietly. She's my daughter. But there's a pattern, isn't there? 1 accusation could be true. 2 is concerning. 3. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Update 3. The confrontation. I met my sister at a coffee shop, not the shelter, somewhere public. I told her I had some questions before I could make a decision about the apartment. She was immediately defensive. Questions? What kind of questions? I talked to your husband. Her face went white, then red. You what? I didn't tell him where you are. I just wanted to hear his side. His side? He's an abuser. There is no side. He's manipulated you, can't you see that? He showed me texts, photos, financial records, things that don't match what you've told me. He's lying. He's a liar. I also talked to Mom. She mentioned some things from your past. The ex-boyfriend. The boss. For a moment, my sister was completely silent. I watched her cycle through emotions, shock, anger, something that looked almost like calculation. Then she exploded. You talked to OM? About me? How could you? I'm the victim here and you're investigating me like I'm a criminal. This is exactly what abusers count on, people not believing women. He's manipulated you. Mom has always liked him better than me. Everyone always takes the man's side. Her voice rose, drawing looks from other customers. I can't believe my own brother would betray me like this. I'm not betraying you. I'm trying to understand. Understand what? That you don't believe me? That you think I'm lying?" She stood up, grabbing her purse. "If something happens to me, it's on you. If he finds me and hurts me, you'll have to live with knowing you could have helped and you chose to interrogate me instead. Abuse victims are never believed. That's why we stay. Because we know people like you will demand proof while we're getting hurt." She paused at the edge of the table, and her voice dropped to something cold and quiet. "I hope you can sleep at night." Then she walked out. Update 4. The decision. I sat in that coffee shop for a long time after she left. I felt sick, confused, guilty. What if I was wrong? What if she was telling the truth and I'd just abandoned her? What if something did happen to her? But something had clicked during her reaction. A genuine abuse victim facing safety questions might be hurt, frustrated, might struggle to provide documentation. But the immediate leap to, "if I die it's your fault," felt like manipulation, not fear. The demand for my entire apartment, not shelter, ownership, felt like extraction, not protection. She wasn't trying to convince me through evidence. She was trying to steamroll me through guilt. I spent days researching domestic abuse patterns, false accusations, how to tell the difference. The truth was complicated. Most abuse claims are real, and victims often can't prove what happened behind closed doors. But false claims exist too, and they follow patterns: escalating demands, inconsistent stories, history of similar accusations against multiple people, refusal to use official channels, isolation of the accuser from anyone who questions the narrative. My sister's situation matched the false accusation pattern uncomfortably well. I consulted with a domestic violence advocate anonymously. Described the situation without names. The advocate was careful not to make judgments, but said, "Genuine safety planning doesn't usually involve demanding family members' property. We focus on restraining orders, secure housing through proper channels, documentation for legal protection. If someone is avoiding all official channels while demanding private resources, that's unusual. Not proof of lying, but unusual." I made my decision. Update 5. The refusal and fallout. I called my sister. She didn't answer, so I left a voicemail. "I love you and I want you safe. But I'm not transferring my apartment. I'll help you in every other way. Money for rent, help with applications, support for getting a restraining order if you want one. If you're genuinely in danger, those options will help. If you're not willing to use any official channels for safety, I can't solve that with my apartment." She called back an hour later. The conversation was short. "So you're choosing property over your sister's life?" "I'm choosing to help you in ways that make sense. I'm not choosing to give away my home based on a story I can't verify from someone who has a history of similar stories." "I don't have a history of..." "The ex-boyfriend. The boss. Mom told me." Silence. "Then, Mom is a liar too. You're all liars. You've all been turned against me. I'm offering real help. Rent money. Legal support. Connections to services. I don't want your help. I want you to believe me. And you don't. So we're done." She hung up. That was the last time we spoke. In the weeks that followed, she told the family I'd sided with her abuser. She told everyone I didn't believe women. She painted me as a betrayer, a misogynist, someone who valued property over his sister's life. Some family members believed her. Others, remembering the past patterns Mom had finally started discussing, stayed neutral. I became the villain in my sister's narrative, the brother who could have saved her but chose not to. She cut me off completely. Blocked my number. Unfriended me on social media. Our mother tried to mediate, but my sister refused any conversation that included me. The revelation. 3 months later, I learned the truth through a cousin who still talked to both of us. My sister and her husband were divorcing. Through normal legal channels. No emergency. No hiding. My sister was living in a regular apartment in the next town over, found through normal means. She'd gotten a job at a new marketing firm. She was dating someone new. The dangerous abuser, husband hadn't stalked her. Hadn't threatened her. Hadn't done anything except hire a divorce lawyer. The restraining order she'd told me was pointless to even try, had never been attempted. The police report she'd said was useless, had never been filed. There was nothing to report. She wasn't in hiding. She was just getting divorced. The picture became clear. She'd wanted out of the marriage. Fine, valid, that's her right. But she'd also wanted assets. My apartment would have been a significant asset in her divorce proceedings if she owned it. Or she could have sold it, kept the money, started over with a nest egg that had nothing to do with the divorce settlement. The abuse story was designed to extract property under emotional pressure, avoiding the slower, less profitable route of normal divorce division. I was supposed to be the emergency bank. Too scared for her safety to ask questions. 1 year later. My sister remarried last month. New husband, new city, new life. I heard about it through relatives who still talk to both of us. Apparently she's happy. The dangerous ex-husband who was going to stalk and murder her? He's also remarried. Also moved on. Never contacted her again after signing the divorce papers. The emergency that required my apartment was never real. Just another dramatic exit in a life full of them. I got a text from a cousin last week. Saw your sister's wedding photos. She looks happy. I stared at the message for a long time. The woman who was fleeing mortal danger a year ago just had a destination wedding. The abuser she needed to hide from never came looking. The apartment that was the only way to keep her safe wasn't needed because the danger wasn't real. I didn't respond to the text. I just made dinner in my apartment. My apartment. The one I kept by asking questions when everyone wanted me to just believe. Final reflections. She went from, I need a place to stay, to, I need to own your apartment, in 2 weeks. Safety planning doesn't escalate to property transfer. Manipulation does. I didn't see it at first because I was too scared for her. Fear made me stupid. Questioning made me clear. She said police don't help and restraining orders are just paper. Every legitimate resource was dismissed. The only solution was my apartment. When only one answer is acceptable, the question isn't really being asked. It's an extraction dressed as a plea. I talked to her husband. Dangerous, I know. But his evidence complicated the narrative. Texts, photos, records. I'm not saying he was perfect. But her story had him as a monster, and nothing I found supported that. Either he's a criminal mastermind who fooled everyone, or she's telling stories. Occam's razor cut a certain direction. Mom mentioned past accusations. The ex-boyfriend who was stalking her, he wasn't. The boss who harassed her, he didn't. Patterns matter. 1 accusation could be true. 2 is concerning. 3, with the same escalation, same victim narrative, same demands? That's not bad luck. That's behavior. The advocate said genuine safety planning doesn't usually involve demanding family property. They focus on official channels, orders, documentation, proper housing. My sister rejected all of that. Only wanted my apartment. What kind of safety plan bypasses every system and targets a family member's assets? She cut me off and told everyone I sided with her abuser. Classic. When the manipulation fails, the character assassination begins. I couldn't defend myself without seeming to attack a victim. She'd built a narrative where questioning her was proof of guilt. 3 months later, she was living normally, divorcing normally, no hiding required. The dangerous husband hired a lawyer, not a hitman. The emergency was invented. The apartment demand was about divorce assets, not safety. I was supposed to fund her exit with my property, no questions asked. Final thoughts. My sister said she was fleeing an abuser. Said she needed my apartment as a safe house. Said transferring it to her name was the only way to be truly hidden. I wanted to believe her. Wanted to help. But something was off. The escalating demands, the inconsistent details, the rejection of every official resource. I asked questions. She called me a betrayer. Cut me off. Told the family I sided with her abuser. 3 months later, she was divorcing normally, living normally, no emergency at all. The abuser never stalked her. Never threatened her. Just hired a divorce attorney like a normal person. The apartment wasn't for safety. It was for assets. 1 more dramatic exit, 1 more accusation, 1 more family member used and discarded when they didn't comply. I kept my apartment. Lost my sister. I don't know which cost more. But I know I made the right choice. Not because I don't believe women, I do. But because I believe in patterns, too. And my sister's pattern was clear once I stopped being too scared to see it. Some victims are real. Some are performing. The real ones deserve everything we can give. The performing ones count on us not knowing the difference. I learned the difference. It cost me a sister. But it saved my home.